And what about those Palestinians in hospital who are on life support and babies and incubators whose life support and incubator will have to be turned off because the Israelis have cut the power to Gaza?
Are you seriously keep on asking me about Palestinian civilians?
After cutting off electricity, water, food, and fuel to Gaza, the Israeli government now appears to be on the verge of invading the open-air prison that they already control the borders of. So, I'm going to break down some of the information coming out of this. I apologize if I am not my usual self. This entire week has been this story. This is the biggest story. We are on the verge of a genocide. There is nothing else that is nearly as important as what is going on right now in Gaza. And it's incredibly depressing. But it's important to get this information out. It's important that people understand the power imbalance at the heart of this issue. When you have Israel backed by the world's biggest superpowers in the US, the UK, Europe, Canada, and they're all backing Israel just continually bombing civilians in Gaza. Yes, Hamas, which is in power in Gaza, is a terrorist organization. Hamas is not 2.2 million people in Gaza. Half of them civilian, or most of them civilians, half of them children. Because again, you can't live long in Gaza. Average age is 18. There's dirty water, not a lot of food, not a lot of medicine, not a lot of help generally. And borders, again, closed off between Israel, and the one border between Egypt and Gaza is often closed off. It's closed off right now and being bombed by Israel. There is no escape for these people while they're being told to get out. Let me get the headline here. From the AP, Israel orders the evacuation of 1.1 million people from the northern part of Gaza. I'll get to more from this piece in a second. So for clarity here, Israel wants to expel more Palestinians from their homes and lands in a single day than it did during the entire 1948 Nakba. More than 1.1 million Palestinians live north of the Red Line at Wadi Gaza. Israel wants to relocate all of them to the south of it in 24 hours. Keeping in mind, a lot of the infrastructure is completely gone, roads blocked. Most people don't have cars. Of course, again, fuel's been cut off, even if they had cars. The idea of, I'll give you more context here in a second. So from Omar Badar, Israel is demanding that 1.1 million Palestinian civilians leave their homes in Gaza. For perspective, Israel could displace every human being in Boston and Miami combined, and that would still not reach the scale of displacement they want in the besieged strip with nowhere to go. And again, that's within 24 hours. Imagine trying to do that in Boston and Miami where there is infrastructure, where there are cars. It's just unthinkable what is going on there and what the people in Gaza have to deal with right now. So, as the AP writes, this could signal an impending ground offensive, though the Israeli military has not yet confirmed such an appeal. On Thursday, it said that while it was preparing, a decision has not yet been made. But it appears that is what they're moving toward. The UN has come out strongly against what Israel is planning to do and what they're doing right now with this attempt to push these people out of their homes. Writing here, Gaza, nowhere to go as humanitarian situation reaches lethal low. Going on to write, UN humanitarians expressed deep concern on Friday for all civilians in the Gaza Strip following Israel's order for the entire population there to leave the north amid ongoing airstrikes and a deepening humanitarian crisis. And there's a link to all this below the video under sources on YouTube, but so you can go through more of it here. But the UN considers it impossible for such movement to take place without devastating humanitarian consequences and appeals for the order to be rescinded. And from the UN relief chief here, the noose around the civilian population in Gaza is tightening. How are 1.1 million people supposed to move across a densely populated war zone in less than 24 hours. I shudder to think that what the humanitarian consequences of the evacuation order would be. This is where we get to this being on not just the Israeli government, but its allies. If the US, the UK, the EU, Canada came out and condemned this and put some repercussions in place on Israel if they moved forward with this, then Israel at that point would maybe have to act, or in this case, not act and pull back. But from what I have seen, all of these governments are willfully engaged in this, in supporting Israel, in whatever reaction they're having, in the continuous bombing of civilians within Gaza. It shouldn't have to be said, but it's important to be clear about this. Hamas does not equal Palestinians. Palestinians are not Hamas. They are separate. Yes, of course, people in Hamas are Palestinian, but not all Palestinians are Hamas. The vast majority of them, of course, are not. They are civilians living in an open-air prison, controlled by Israel. Does Gaza have the ability to cut off electricity, food, water, fuel to Israel? No. That is the power imbalance at the heart of this. The fact that Israel has that power over Gaza is the problem. Gaza Health Ministry told me it was impossible to evacuate the wounded to the south. There are no extra beds in any hospitals anywhere for people to move to. Most of the wounded are unstable. They'll die en route. All hospitals in Gaza, even after they've been expanded, are full. Israel's president is denying the concept of innocent civilians, just to give you an idea of their mindset here during all of this. So, there's a video of this as well. So maybe I'll show you the video and then I'll read the quote just to be clear on what the quote is.
We are operating militarily according to rules of international law, period. Unequivocally. It's an entire nation out there that is responsible. It's not true. This rhetoric about civilians not aware, not involved, it's absolutely not true. They could have risen up, they could have fought against that evil regime which took over Gaza in a coup d'etat, but we're at war.
So, quote here, "It is not true, this rhetoric about civilians were not aware, were not involved. It's absolutely not true. They could have risen up against that evil regime that took over Gaza in a coup d'etat." I'm going to get to how ridiculous this statement is, in particular when it comes to Gaza and Hamas. But just on its face, you are blaming the civilian population for a group that was put into power in 2006. Half of Palestinians in Gaza are under 18. They did not vote for Hamas. They were not around. And even apart from that, using this same logic means that you would also excuse the actions by Hamas on civilians in Israel, because Israelis should have risen up in a coup d'etat to take over power from Netanyahu as the Israeli government occupies Palestinians. Which clearly, I'm not excusing. Hamas's actions are not excused. They should not have attacked civilians, just as Israel should not be attacking civilians in Gaza. You can't, on one hand, say it's the fault of civilians in Gaza, so we're attacking them all, and then freak out when Hamas attacks civilians in Israel. Because it's the same logic that they're using to attack you. Both are absolutely absurd. And in the case of Hamas specifically, this goes to how, and I covered this a bit in my last video. For years, this is from the Times of Israel. For years, Netanyahu propped up Hamas. Now it's blown up in our faces. Netanyahu has propped up Hamas specifically because he does not want to see an independent Palestine. He sees Hamas as a a vehicle for the destruction that he wants to cause. To give you more clarity on this, most of the time, Israeli policy was to treat the Palestinian Authority, which is a group that wants to see peace, as a burden, and Hamas as an asset. Far-right finance minister in the hardline government and leader of the religious Zionism party said so himself in 2015. According to various reports, Netanyahu made a similar point at a Likud faction meeting in early 2019 when he was quoted as saying that those who oppose a Palestinian state should support the transfer of funds to Gaza, in this case being Hamas, because maintaining the separation between the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank and Hamas in Gaza would prevent the establishment of a Palestinian state. Here he is saying, support those in power in Gaza, being Hamas. Support them over the Palestinian Authority because the Authority wants to see peace, whereas Hamas is a terrorist organization. And you should support Hamas because of that, because it undercuts their ability to be an independent state. While Netanyahu does not make these kinds of statements publicly or officially, his words are in line with the policy that he implemented. And the coverage I'm seeing, and I said this in my last video as well, the coverage I'm seeing out of Israel is a lot more objective, a lot more critical of Netanyahu than what you're seeing in the US, in the UK, in Canada. Because they understand the power at play here. They understand how Netanyahu helped to bring this upon Israelis. And I don't have, maybe I'll cut this in. There is a polling showing from Israel that the vast majority of Israelis want to see Netanyahu out. They want to get him out. Because again, they see him as the problem. Matt Binder, yesterday during our podcast, he brought up that the best way to contextualize this for Americans is that Netanyahu is essentially the Trump of Israel. So if you are right now supporting the Israeli government and what they're doing, you are supporting the Trump of Israel. Understand how much of a destructive force Netanyahu and his government are. He does, and to be clear as well, the Israeli government does not equal Israelis. Most Israeli people do not support what Netanyahu has been doing and is doing. Mehdi Hassan here tweeting this incredible tweet out. It's been a day and I still can't quite get over the fact that the Israeli military itself proudly published these pictures. So the Israeli Air Force here proudly displaying the destruction they have caused in Gaza, claiming that, we've dropped all these bombs against Hamas targets. This is civilian infrastructure. But maybe some Hamas fighters live in some of these homes? Maybe. But you, in the process, killed children. Because half of people in Gaza are children, in all likelihood, any bomb that hits is going to kill a child. There's also, this is its own story, but Israel is now using white phosphorus, which, to be clear on that, white phosphorus, which can be used either for marking, signaling, and obscuring, or as a weapon to set fires that burn people and objects, has a significant incendiary effect that can severely burn people and set structures, fields, and other civilian objects in the vicinity on fire. The use of white phosphorus in Gaza, one of the most densely populated areas in the world, magnifies the risk to civilians and violates the international humanitarian law prohibition on putting civilians at unnecessary risk. And this is from Human Rights Watch. Jewish Voice for Peace, tweeting out here, we can and we must stop this. Never again means never again for anyone. Saying that we call on all people of conscience to stop the imminent genocide of Palestinians. We demand our government work towards de-escalation, that it immediately stop sending weapons to the Israeli military, a future of peace and safety for all, grounded in justice, freedom, and equality for all, is still the only option. And B'Tselem, a human rights organization based in Israel, saying the humanitarian disaster in Gaza must be averted. And they go on to discuss the horrifying war crimes perpetrated by Hamas on Saturday, and then discusses Israel has been bombing Gaza relentlessly and indiscriminately. Thousands of tons of bombs have been dropped, and residents have nowhere to flee. And they go on to discuss that impact. And B'Tselem has been one of the clear voices out of Israel, calling for an end to the occupation of Palestinians. Last thing here, just to show you the mindset of some of the people in power in Israel. This is on Sky News, ex-Israeli PM Naftali Bennett. Let me just play the video.
And what about those Palestinians in hospital who are on life support, and babies and incubators whose life support and incubator will have to be turned off because the Israelis have cut the power to Gaza?
Are you seriously keep on asking me about Palestinian civilians? What's wrong with you? Have you not seen what happened? We're fighting Nazis. We don't target them. Now, the world can come and bring them anything they want. If you want to bring them electricity, I'm not going to feed electricity or water to my enemies. If anyone else wants, that's fine. We're not responsible for them.
This is the point.
But you
this
keep
is the
on.
point.
I want to tell you. No, listen. You listen to me right now. I've heard you enough.
No, I understand. We're trying to have a conversation here. Listen, this is my program. This is my show. And I am asking the questions. You're raising your voice, and I've asked you, and we've already stopped, please, and let me finish. We've already distinguished between Hamas.
I want to tell you, shame on you.
You're trying to speak over me.
We are not. Shame on you.
It's nothing about shame. We're trying to have a conversation about a very serious situation here, and you are refusing to address it.
Look at the filibustering. Because he knows exactly what their government is doing. He does not want to answer the question because there's no way to answer the question that doesn't make you sound like a psychopath.